This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Welcome to Brew Crime. This is Mike.
And Beck.
And Nina.
All right, this episode we're going to cover signatures. So we're going to start out with Beck because she's going to have a little bit of an explanation of what a signature is to start.
Yeah, I looked into the difference between MO and signature, and it was extremely confusing, to say the least.
Yes.
I'm sure you guys had the similar experience while trying to get a case.
Yep.
The MO is what the person must do to commit the crime, and the signature isn't required, but typically those same people are uncontrollably compelled to do it anyway. I'm not sure if that helps clear it up, but like if you take Jack the Ripper as an example, so a knife and sex worker are part of his MO, but the mutilation is part of his signature. The mutilation wasn't required to commit the specific crime, but the knife bonus. And the sex worker were. It's still so confusing, and a lot of sources use MO and signature really interchangeably, so it's very confusing,
So
to say the
right.
least.
And MO is modus operandi.
Yeah, modus operandi. Yeah. So the person that I chose for this episode has a signature in his signature, and he created a fancy signature for himself.
I love this case.
Mm-hmm. So either you're completely confused, or you know, like Nina, exactly what I'm talking about. So this episode I have called BT. No, that's not okay. This is a story about a torturous monster stalking the streets of Wichita, the BTK killer. The beers that I chose to pair for this episode are...
Torture.
I'm gonna make Mike, myself, and Nina do a side-by-side comparison of Bud Light Orange and Coors Slice, which is Coors Light Orange beer. And the tasting in itself of having to drink Bud Light and Coors is torture.
Oh, hell yeah, it is. For two of us.
For two of us.
I don't
anyway.
know. I don't do flavored. I just like lagers. So this could be all three of us affected by it.
Yeah. So
I doubt it, but
here we go.
That would be the Bud Light Orange. Yeah. Just to compare the sound.
That's Bud Light Orange passed.
Okay, Bud Light Orange. Ooh, look at that color.
It's practically clear. And Coors Light.
It almost looks like a healthy pea color. Almost.
Healthy pea is clear.
I said almost. It's almost healthy. Yeah. I didn't say healthy. Well, they both smell like C+.
As long as they don't smell like pee.
I think the Bud Light Orange smells less offensive to me.
All right, let's give this a shot.
So the Bud Light smells like actual orange?
For any foreigners out there from my country, one of them smells like Cedevita.
And
Bud Light Orange smells like cheap orange juice.
And the Coors Light smells like orange floor cleaner.
Kind of corny, grainy orange. Orange Pledge with some grain.
And Mr. Clean
it's very watery. It's like when you get that flavored orange water where you can buy a case of like 24 for $2. That's what the Coors Light one tastes like to me.
Okay, the Bud Light, it tastes like...
It's so funny listening to me talk about these not fancy beers.
It's kind of
At least it tastes
juice.
Like orange,
yeah,
though.
Cheap orange juice. A little bit of maybe grain. A little bit of rice.
So watery.
Mm-hmm. It tastes like I'm drinking like cheap like Sunny D or something.
Yeah, I don't know if I can drink the Coors Light one. But the Bud Light orange isn't unbearable.
Oh, the Coors one is just like, it's more corn than it is orange.
Yeah.
And I like to eat corn, but not drink it.
Corn on the cob's pretty sick.
What about you, Nina?
Well,
Oh,
I think what was the first one? Was
It's
the
very
Bud Light?
burpy.
Bud Light?
yeah.
The darker one is the Bud Light.
I do like the Bud Light better. I do agree that it's watery, but I don't really like the flavor of orange in either. It just tastes like man-made orange, not like actual orange.
Oh, yeah. Neither tastes like real orange.
No. One just tastes drinkable. One is kind of like, I might finish this if I'm desperate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was torturous a little bit.
Your aim was torture, and the Coors especially was torture. The Bud wasn't torture, but it's not great.
However, I do like the can. I like for the Coors Light that they made the mountains
The orange slices? Yeah.
Whoever in your marketing department came up with that, gold star.
Bud one is pretty pathetic because it's like the Bud can, but in orange.
But it's a
Well-
nice orange, and I like that the tap is orange.
So the Bud one is like that because they have a bunch of different flavors right now, and
Yeah.
they went for a common theme, all in different colors. That's the only reason it looks
Yeah.
like that.
But it looks just like the regular Bud can these days.
I bought 2 tall cans for a combined cost of $6.60.
Nice.
They were only $3 each. Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go for my case. Dennis Lynn Rader was born March 9th, 1945 in Pittsburgh, Kansas, but grew up in Wichita. He went to Riverview Elementary and appeared to be a quiet and polite young boy. He was the eldest of 4 sons born to William Elvin Rader. Amazing name. Elvin is your middle name? Awesome. And Dorothea May Cook. He went on to Wichita Heights High School, and by then he had some disturbing secrets. He had started fantasizing about tying up girls and raping them by the time he got to high school. He was also killing local dogs and cats by torturing and hanging them. You know who does that?
Sickos, psychos, serial killers.
Future serial killers.
Yeah.
Named it. He graduated in 1963, worked for a while before entering Kansas Wesleyan College in 1965. He completed 2 semesters, but once he turned 21, he joined the Air Force, which was not exactly uncommon at the time, right?
No, not at all.
Nope.
He served there from 1966 to 1970. During his time in the military, he started peeping at women and stealing their underwear.
Yep. Another telltale sign of what's to come.
Yep.
Yeah.
After his discharge, he moved to Park City and worked at a Leakers IGA supermarket in the meat department. His mother also worked there as a bookkeeper. Dennis met Paula Dietz at church, and after only a few dates, he proposed.
Which was common for the times.
Especially considering they were both church-going people.
Yep. A courtship, a short courtship.
Yeah.
They married on May 22nd, 1971, and went on to have 1 son and 1 daughter. Dennis attended Butler County Community College, just 33 miles, about 53 kilometers in Canadian, away in El Dorado. He earned his associate degree in electronics in 1973. He went on to graduate from Wichita State University in 1979 with a bachelor's degree in administration and justice.
Jesus.
Yeah. Dennis had a wide variety of jobs, the most interesting of which was as an installation technician for ADT Security Services. He worked there from 1974 to 1988.
Just who you want running security systems.
I'm so excited to talk about this, and I don't want to give anything away that you might say, but guys, if you're listening, this plays a huge part of how he was able to commit some of his crimes. This is importante.
Many of the installations were for people specifically worried about a nightmare that had been stalking the streets of Wichita, the self-monikered BTK Killer, or BTK Strangler. Stands for Bind, Torture, Kill. Little did they know that the mild-mannered, albeit anal-retentive, man that they had invited into their homes was in fact the monster that they were trying to lock out. This job, as well as a few other that I'll mention later, gave Dennis ample access to stalk his victims in time before initiating the actual attack. On January 15th, 1974 alone, he killed 4 people. That's horrible by itself, but the details make it so much worse. The 4 victims were all members of the Otero family. The father, Joseph Otero, aged 38, mother, Julie Otero, aged 33, and 2 of their 3 children, Joseph Otero Jr., aged 9, and Josephine Otero, aged 11. BTK was not expecting the father to be there and was likely hoping that the children wouldn't be there, as his sole violent interest was in women.
Yeah.
Make matters worse, the family's eldest child, Charlie Otero, came home from 10th grade and discovered the bodies.
Yep.
So there's a lot more information online about this horrible crime, but I didn't want to get into the details about what he did to the kids because we prefer not to do that kind of thing.
We try not to talk too much about that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. In October of the same year, BTK wrote a letter describing what he had done to the Otero family. One source said that he hid it in an engineering book in the public library, and one said that he sent it to the Wichita Eagle-Beacon. Possibly there was 2 copies of the same letter. Maybe one of the sources was wrong. I'm not really sure. Mm-hmm. When this crime didn't go exactly as he expected, he started to do a lot more planning for the murders. He even had what he called a hit kit. It included various things such as rope, duct tape, a screwdriver, as well as his disposable hit clothes, and occasionally a mask. I'll show you guys a picture of the mask that they found after he was captured.
Oh, Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you just imagine someone coming into your house with that?
Yeah, they have I don't know if everyone's seen yet, but Mindhunters, the second season. Obviously, in the background, one of the ongoing stories, which hopefully in season 3 they'll talk more about, I think focuses on BTK. And then in the second season, I think it's the second episode, the person who's playing this character is wearing that mask. It's freaking terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, it completely mutes any sort of facial recognition.
Yeah.
Except for extreme feminine sadness in the eyes is the only thing that's left.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have the picture available on the website if you want to go check it out. So before entering the home, he also cut the phone lines at the victims so that even if they did escape the room he was in, they still wouldn't be able to call for help. By early 1978, the police still hadn't caught BTK. They also had no major leads as to who the hell he was. And you know who hated this? That egocentric douchebag, Dennis.
Of course.
Yeah. On January 31st, he sent a poem to the Wichita Eagle-Beacon referring to the murder of Shirley Vienne Relford. Shirley was found in her home March 17, 1977. She was only 24 and had been found strangled to death. Her 3 children, Bud Relford, 8, Stephen Relford, 5, and the youngest, Stephanie Relford, were also found, but thankfully they were still alive. BTK had locked them in the bathroom before taking Shirley's life.
Wow.
Apparently the reaction that he got from this wasn't big enough, because on February 10, 1978, he sent another letter to KAKE, that's a TV station in Wichita. The letter claimed complete responsibility for the Otero family as well as the murders of Catherine Bright, Shirley Vienne, and Nancy Fox. This got the reaction that BTK was looking for. Police Chief Richard Lemunion announced that a serial killer was in the area and had threatened to strike again. Catherine was only 21 on April 4th, 1974, when she was stabbed to death in her home. Her 19-year-old brother Kevin happened to be there at the time of the attack and was shot twice in the head, but survived.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Police later confirmed that she was a BTK victim. He had intended on strangling her to death, but because she fought back so voraciously, he ended up stabbing her. He had named this crime Project Lights Out. December 8, 1977, Nancy Fox was found bound and strangled in her home. She was only 25. By this point, BTK was so desperate for attention that he called the police himself to report the crime after committing it. And they now had his voice on tape.
What an asshole.
He's a fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
He's nuts.
On April 28, 1979, BTK waits inside the home of 63-year-old Anna Williams. He waited and waited, but gave up hours later when she didn't show up. Anna arrived home a lot later than she was expected as she was out visiting friends, and it saved her life. Fail, Dennis. You fail. He became obsessed with the idea that she had gotten away. I legitimately hope it kept him up at night.
Me too.
Like, I really hope he lost sleep.
Yeah. It's interesting that failed attempt didn't lead him to make a irrational decision the same night and just go kill someone else for the sake of getting off on that high.
Yeah.
Because some would and then get caught because it's not as planned or as meticulous per se. But it's interesting he had the restraint to not act out on whatever feelings he may have had of what he was trying to do because she came home so late, whatever, it wasn't planned.
So what he did do was send her a letter to let her know that he had been there. Like,
wow.
It's terrifying. She's so old, like old, cute little lady. Like, yeah.
And she was not home because she was out at a friend's house until like midnight. So
She's lucky.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why you need to have friends.
Yeah.
Keeps
At
you
least
safe.
one good friend.
Yeah.
On August 15th, 1979, the police played the recording of his voice on the radio and on TV. They received more than 100 tips within the day, but sadly none of them led to an arrest. The attention seemed to make Dennis escalate his violence, or at the very least, it escalated the daring of his attacks. On May 5th, 1985, Maureen Hedge, 53 at the time, was found in a ditch at East 53rd Street North in Wichita. She had been killed 8 days earlier, on April 27th. Denise took her body to the Christ Lutheran Church and photographed her body in various bondage positions. This is the church that he not only attended, but was president of the church council.
Yeah. Just so fucking weird.
Yeah. He'd stored black plastic sheets and other materials that he needed for the night, and he called this plan Project Cookie.
I hate that he also had names for, like, Cookie. Like, what the fuck does that have to do with anything?
Yeah, totally. In 1989, Dennis worked in the Wichita area as a census field operations supervisor. It was only a temporary job. In May 1991, he started a new job as a dog catcher and compliance officer in Park City. So, we all remember his childhood activities with animals, right?
Yeah.
Not good things. Neighbors remembered him as being overzealous and sometimes extremely strict. One neighbor even complained after he killed her dog for no reason.
Wow.
Wow.
As far as his family was concerned, Dennis was a hard-working husband and father. He provided for them, volunteered at their church. He was even a Boy Scout leader.
Of course he was.
What his loving family didn't know about Dennis was that he was into, amongst other things, women's underwear, specifically stealing it from women and wearing it. So, women's underwear, cool, okay, whatever. Everyone's into something, but consent. It's key. Consent is key. He was also into autoerotic asphyxiation, and again, totally fine. Extremely dangerous, but okay. But to compound that was he had saved photos and other mementos from his previous crimes as masturbatory aids and would wear the mask that he wore into their homes to
get off.
Reach.
Yeah, climax.
Fulfillment, let's say.
Which is exactly the scene from Mindhunters.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
The photos were down,
Yeah.
and he was dragging himself with the doorknob. Anyways, for those who haven't seen it, spoiler.
Yeah.
But it's a thing.
Also, go watch the damn show because it's great.
So good, yeah.
Yeah.
Before starting his job as a dog catcher, he took his final victim. Dolores E. Davis was found on February 1st, 1991 at West 117th Street North and North Meridian Street in Park City. Dennis had strangled her to death with pantyhose on January 19th, 1991. Like 2 weeks before she was discovered. And then nothing. Radio silence. It would be 13 years before they heard from him again. Authorities actually considered that he had either been arrested on an unrelated charge or that he had died. It had been considered a cold case for some time. At this point, the police hadn't attributed the murders of Vicky Wegerle, Maureen Hedge, or Dolores Davis to BTK. On March 19th, 2004, the Wichita Eagle received a letter containing a photocopy of Vicky Wegerle's driver's license and photos of her body. This was enough for police to link it to BTK, but they still didn't know that BTK and Dennis were one and the same. Mm-hmm. They took this opportunity to apply new DNA technology to evidence that had been collected from underneath Vicky's fingernails. She's a fucking fighter. Clawed the shit out of that guy. Good for her. They ran this DNA profile against approximately 1,300 men.
Wow.
While they were doing this, Dennis just couldn't stop himself. He sent 10 more letters or packages after this one before he was arrested. That's nearly once a month he was sending something to either the media or to the police. Sometimes it's just a letter, sometimes some drawings. He even sent a small doll that was bound and had a tiny plastic bag over its head.
A Barbie doll.
My God.
Yeah.
He thinks he's so smart to be sending that much stuff to the media and police.
He also had a daughter, so it's like, what, did you steal one of her dolls and send it? Like,
probably.
Maybe.
Or he bought 2 dolls, one for the daughter and one for that.
I don't know.
Ugh.
Each time brought the police closer to identifying and arresting him. He was so consumed by this attention that if a package or letter was not found, he would follow up with the police directly about its whereabouts. And that's what happened in January of 2005. He left a cereal box in the bed of a truck at a local Home Depot, and it went unreported in the media. And he just couldn't handle that. So he reported it to the police. Like, he contacted the police to be like, what happened to that cereal box? So they pulled the security camera footage from that Home Depot, and all it revealed was a black Jeep Cherokee, but it wasn't clear enough to see who the driver was.
Or license plate or anything, and they couldn't figure it out.
He even asked police if he sent them a floppy disk, would they be able to trace it back to him? And they replied in a newspaper article saying that they would not be able to trace that. Really? Just gonna trust them, right?
Yeah.
Because he was so egocentric and so sure that they would never be able to catch him, that they were so stupid.
Why would they lie to him? He's
like, compared to his motherfucking genius, they would never be able to catch him. So he was so sure of himself, so he went ahead and sent a floppy disk to KSAS-TV in Wichita. Quick note for you youngsters out there. A floppy disk is this thing
It's the save button.
that we used to use to store computer information before USBs existed.
Or SD cards.
Or
Yeah.
CDs.
Or CDs. Or
Yeah.
Blu-rays.
Before. You
And
know,
zip
when you
discs,
had
before zip discs.
if you had important things like
It's what the little save
really
icon on
low
board
grade
looks
songs called MIDI files, You would keep those on a floppy disk.
Did it.
Yeah.
So for the young kids, again, excluding myself, so on any of your Word files, it's the icon that's a save button is a little floppy disk.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that was the smaller floppy disk. That was the 3.5, I think.
Yeah.
There was also
one
the
before that.
actual big
It was
floppy.
actually
that was actually
floppy.
floppy, yeah.
Yeah.
That was before my time. I'm of the time of the floppy disk, but not the actual like floppy
Floppies.
big one.
floppy big one, okay.
So
That's what she
another
said.
just like quick interesting fact about floppy disks is that the missile silos that are still active in the US, their information is actually still stored on floppy disk.
That is
Because
terrifying.
that's when they were installed, was at the time that floppy disk was the height of technology, and therefore the information is still literally on floppy disk.
That's cool.
It's terrifying.
Yes,
Anyway,
it is terrifying.
back to the terrifying point. Big surprise to no one except for Dennis. The police were obviously able to trace this floppy disk.
Yeah.
They found embedded information from a deleted document that had been saved on the disk previously, and it contained the words Christ Lutheran Church, and it was last modified by someone named Dennis.
No way.
Dun dun dun. Shocking to everyone, I'm sure.
Totally, yeah.
And also computers weren't like huge around then, so I think in the church there was really like one computer, and
Yeah.
him as the president had anyways.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He couldn't say someone else used the computer. It wasn't me who saved it last.
No, not many people had personal home computers at this time.
No. Exactly. So a simple internet search revealed that someone named Dennis Rader was the president of the church council there. The investigators went by his house and saw a black Jeep Cherokee
No.
parked outside, remarkably similar to the one they saw in the Home Depot footage. And this is all well and good, but it's also all circumstantial. Investigators needed something to link Dennis to the actual crimes. Investigators came up with an unorthodox plan. They got a warrant to run DNA profile garnered from Vicky Wegerle's fingernails, which I'd mentioned before, against a pap smear that Dennis's daughter had taken at the Kansas State University Medical Clinic while she was a student there.
Wow.
And it matched.
There was a familial match. So that meant that BTK was closely related to Dennis's daughter, and that was enough for an arrest.
Jeez.
On February 25th, 2005, BTK, Dennis, was pulled over and arrested while driving near his home in Park City. They retrieved evidence from his home, his shed, his church, his office, his vehicle, basically everywhere he'd been. Even the library, his local library they got some evidence from the local library. He was officially charged 3 days later on 10 counts of murder. Bail was set at $10 million, and he was assigned a public attorney on March 1st. On May 3rd, he pled not guilty. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
His trial date was set for June 27th. On this date, he changed his plea to guilty. He spoke of the details of this crime and offered no remorse whatsoever. He also admitted that he planned to kill again in October of 2004, but his plan just didn't come to fruition. Less than 1 month later, on July 26th, his wife was granted an emergency divorce. That just meant that she got to skip the usual 60-day wait time, which I thought was really short. It's a year here.
Yeah.
You have to be separated for a year and then you can get divorced. But 60 days, wow. On August 18th, he was sent to serve 10 consecutive life sentences, with the minimum sentence being 175 years. It's a very American sentence.
Yes, it is.
He was transferred to the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas the following day. The same city where he had gone to community college, he was now serving at least 175 years behind bars.
He might get out. You never know.
No. I think I do know.
Yeah.
He's serving his sentence in solitary confinement for his own protection. So he gets an hour of exercise per day and 3 showers a week. After serving a year... Yeah. After serving a year with good behavior, he gained the privilege of access to TV, radio, and magazine. He's by himself for 23 hours a day. How hard is it to get good behavior on that? Like, if you could just sit here and not get into any fights, that would be great, and we'll give you a TV.
Yeah, of course.
Investigators continue to look into the unsolved cases in the surrounding states that could be attributed to Dennis, especially considering that oddly large gap where he was, not doing anything, supposedly. But they didn't find any other cases that could have been him. They even looked into crimes where he had served while he was in the military, because he was traveling at that point. Still nothing. They already suspected that Dennis was the special kind of shithead, where if he had committed a crime, he'd have just said he committed the crime.
Oh, of course, yeah.
He wants the attention. So to date, the 10 murders that he's been convicted of are the only ones that he's legitimately suspected of. And that is the BTK killer. Piece of shit.
Definitely a douchebag, yeah.
He's just so interesting, though, like... when they talk about the living 2 lives and all that, obviously having a happy wife, his kids from everything that, like, when I had looked into it before, whatever, happy kids, like, outstanding member in the community, obviously all of his church services, like all of these things. And then on the other side, you get like one of the worst human beings that we know about.
Yeah. He was really good at separating church and state there.
Yeah, but I think if there's no emotional attachment to anything, and that's what you had said too, like there's no remorse, and I don't think he tried to show no remorse. He just has no.
He
remorse.
didn't have any. Yeah,
of course not.
He just doesn't have that.
It's just not a thing, right? So, yeah, he's very perplexing, and it's really curious about his case too. Is how long he stayed dormant in between crimes, because some of them also have where there'll be 1 or 2 years between the crime, and then a couple months. And then they just get faster and faster because they're chasing that high.
Yeah.
But for how calculated he was, he didn't have that at all. So it's
although sometimes with these killers, something good happens in their life and they go dormant because of it.
Yeah, but I mean,
like when they have kids, and then it's like they're completely focused on raising their kids properly or whatever.
Whatever. There's sometimes it's just something good that happens to them, and they just that's it for a while, and then it comes back.
Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah.
Who knows? All right. Well, we'll get ready for the next one then.
Yep. So for my signature case, for the first time, I thought I was super duper clever like Beck, and I had a title for it. And I thought it was going to be a super original title until I started doing my research and found that every fucking story on this guy had the same title. So I'm just going to repeat what it is, and it's See No Evil. Little bit of background. I'm going to talk about Charles Albright. He's from Texas. He's a very bad man. What his signature was, and I can get into it, his targets were prostitutes, and he had 3 confirmed that he killed, and I don't want to give away his signature, but it's got something to do with their eyes. So, to match my beer to this, I picked one because of the name, which is The Ghosts in Their Eyes. It's a Brett IPA from Anchorage Brewing Company. I'm going to read the caption on the bottle, then I'll let Mike do his thing. It's a pretty big bottle, too. We haven't done one of these big glass bottles in a while.
Yeah, 750 milliliter bottle, yeah. Champagne bottle.
Yeah, it's nice. The Brett IPA brewed with Citra and Galaxy hops, fermented in oak tanks with a Belgian yeast and 2 strains of Brettanomyces, dry hop with Citra and Galaxy hops, bottled, conditioned for natural carbonation. Enjoy. Fermented in Alaska. And it's got a fancy lid, too.
Cork and cage, yep.
Also, probably the most expensive beer I've ever bought, which is why I only got one. But hopefully it's good. The guy at the store said that he hopes I like bread beer, which I don't know what that means.
This bottle's cool, too. Kind of looks like a person screaming. If you look really closely at their eye, there's a skull in it. And on the side of the bottle, there's a bigger version of the eye with the skull in it.
Yeah, the imagery definitely just brought me right to the bottle, and then I read the name, and I was like, okay, you're coming home with me.
Yeah. It's a really cloudy yellow color with a white head. Definitely has that Brett or Brettanomyces funk to it. Hint of citrus or something. It's grainy, bit floral maybe. It's got that really farmhousey smell. On the flavor, it's definitely got a farmhouse thing. It's citrusy. It's got the citrus pith. A little bit of herbal notes, bitterness. The funk from the Brett. It's got kind of like sort of like grapefruity flavor. There's no grapefruit. It's really nice. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't mind it. Sorry.
Your go-to is to say you don't like it.
I'm so used to just saying I hate it that
Yeah.
every once in a while I'll get surprised where it's like, well, maybe not my beer of choice, but I can definitely drink it.
Yeah, I'd have to say the same. It's tart, but refreshing.
Mm-hmm. Not too much of an aftertaste either, which is nice.
8% alcohol.
Never heard of Anchorage Brewing Company before, so.
And this is the first ever batch of this beer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're a really good brewery up in Anchorage, but not a lot of the beer makes it here. And then the price of the bottles also keeps people away a little bit.
Yeah.
So
I wasn't looking at the price, and I got it till and I was like, holy poops. But
Holy poops.
that's okay. It's worth it. And it definitely matches the story right, like nail on the head, so.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to get into talking a little bit about Charles Albright. He's actually the first serial killer that I've anyways done any research on who's actually adopted from an orphanage by Dell and Fred Albright. His adoptive mother was very strict, very overprotective of him, and she actually accelerated his education, getting him to skip a couple of grades. It was interesting to hear about him being adopted because sometimes I think about the nature versus nurture. So I'm curious, did it have something to do with his upbringing, or was it from his natural parents? I don't know. It's interesting. Growing up, he displayed one of the common serial killer traits where he liked to kill small animals. However, his mother would actually help him stuff them because he was into taxidermy, which was really fucking creepy.
Yeah.
Starting with his rap sheet, and he did have a bit of an extensive rap sheet prior to the convictions for the murders that I'll talk about in a little bit. When he was 13, he was involved with some petty theft, and he was arrested for aggravated assault. At 15, he graduated from high school and enrolled at North Texas University. He expressed an interest in training as a medical doctor and a surgeon. He undertook pre-med training but failed to complete it. At age 16, the police caught him with some stolen petty cash along with 2 handguns and a rifle. He was sent to jail for a year. After his release from jail, he attended Arkansas State Teachers College and majored in pre-med studies. After being found with stolen items, he was expelled from the college, but he wasn't prosecuted. From here, he falsified a degree, stole documents, and forged signatures, giving himself a fictitious bachelor's and master's degree.
Oh, fun.
And after all of these things that he did as a youngin', he ended up marrying his college girlfriend, and they had a daughter together. I'm not too sure why she stayed with him after all of the stuff that he had done, but bitches be cray, I guess. After they had a daughter, he continued to forge checks. He was caught forging checks when he was teaching in a high school, and he was placed in probation. And then in 1965, he and his wife separated, and they ended up divorcing 10 years later. So separated for 10, which seems like a lifetime. After the divorce, he was caught stealing hundreds of dollars worth of merchandise from a hardware store, and he received another 2-year prison sentence. However, he only had served 6 months prior to being released. Then in 1981, while visiting some friends, he sexually molested their 14-year-old daughter. He was prosecuted, he pled guilty, and he only received probation.
Wow.
What?
That is garbage.
Yep. He also later claimed that he was actually innocent, but he just pled guilty just to avoid the hassle of going through the system again.
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's just a piece of shit human.
An innocent person wouldn't consider proving themselves innocent as a hassle.
True.
I mean, and this is everything he did before, like, the big crimes.
Yeah.
So to say. So, and then, before we get into that also, in 1985 in Arkansas, Albright met a woman named Dixie. Shortly, he invited her to live with him. Soon after they had moved in together, she essentially became the sole caretaker, paying all the bills, doing everything. He did deliver newspapers in the early morning. However, he said that he only delivered the newspapers so that he'd have an excuse to get away from Dixie to pick up prostitutes.
Oh, okay. That's a excuse and a half.
A gentleman and a scholar.
Yeah.
Anyways. So let's talk about the actual crimes and get into his victims. So as I said, there was 3 victims that he was charged with killing. Given what his signature was, it was very easy after the second one was found to notice that there was obviously common thread.
Yeah.
The first victim was found December 13th in 1990. Her name was Mary Lou Pratt. She was a Caucasian, well-known sex worker in the Oak Cliff neighborhood of Dallas. She was found wearing a t-shirt and a bra. She was shot in the back of her head with a .44 caliber gun, as well as being badly beaten. The medical examiner reported that the killer removed both of her eyes with surgical precision and had apparently taken them with him.
Eek.
Yeah, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but I guess I can mention it now. There's a really great Forensic Files episode about Charles. It's in Evil, See No Evil is what it's called, of course, and it's in season 3. And they talk about the precision of him removing the eyes, because if you think about it, the optic nerve has to be severed. So he actually went through the front of the eye to do that. There was no damage on the outside. So they were able to see, it obviously has to have someone who has some kind of medical background to be able to execute that and properly take out the whole eyeball without tearing any of the eyelids or anything around the face or anything. Yeah, so very, very unique. You know, I'm sure they didn't see that before where they found, dead prostitutes. They're usually not usually but it's usually assaulted and murdered and kind of left.
Yeah, it's not
common.
Pardon me, simple mutilation.
No,
it's
yeah.
like surgical.
Very, very specific. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The next victim was found on February 10th in 1991. Susan Beth Peterson. She was also a Caucasian sex worker and found on the same street that Mary Pratt was found on, just outside of the Dallas city limits near DeSoto city limits. She was nearly nude and she was shot 3 times at the top of her head, her left breast, and in the back of her head. Wow. The medical examiner that found her immediately also checked for her eyes and found that her eyes were also removed. At this point, they obviously realized that they had a common...
same asshole.
Same perpetrator, common theme. In Susan Beth Peterson's case, it was also very clear that it was very surgically removed. There was no damage to the eye socket, lids, nothing. Clean. Her eyes were literally cleanly ripped out. Something I found interesting, too, is some of the research that I had done had said that a lot of the African-American sex workers were really not afraid for their safety because this guy was specifically targeting Caucasian workers, so they're all good, and gave them some peace of mind when they did have to go out and work. Until March 10th, Shirley Williams was an African-American sex worker who was also found dead. Her body was actually dropped and posed in front of an elementary school. Her body was nude like the other ones, propped up against the curb. Her eyes had also been removed, just like the previous 2 victims.
Wow.
Her face was bruised, broken nose. She also was shot in the face through the top of her head.
Oh my God.
And, of course, her eyes were also missing. So those are...
Yeah, wow. Ugh.
Yeah, very, very, very creepy. There was also 2 other women who had come forward. The first being Veronica Rodriguez. I believe she was actually friends with Susan Beth Peterson, and they had said that they both picked up a John, and they had a threesome with him. Susan had an altercation with him, and she got shot, and then this is when Veronica ran away, freaked out into the darkness,
Jeez.
and kind of saved her life. However, when she went to the police to report it, which she went right away, they actually did not believe her because she was also a known drug user, and they referred to her as a crackhead, and she... Yeah. So did not believe her. Obviously, they took down her statement and all of that, but nothing. Another sex worker, Brenda White, also came forward and said that she had gotten into, it was a white pickup truck, and kind of similar story to what Veronica had said, but She preferred to do her business by taking the Johns to a hotel room. He wanted to just drive to a forest and do the exchange there.
Yeah.
She got out of the car and probably saved her life by doing that.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. From here, the police also then received a call from a confidential informant who I couldn't find out the information who it was, but it was a woman who in the past had actually dated Charles Albright. She said that some of the things that she had heard on the street was curious about him, and that she also remembered him having a fascination with box cutters, which is a very unique thing to have.
Yeah.
And with Shirley Williams, which was the last known victim, they were able to see that some of the incisions, there was one, what they assume his hand maybe slipped, and a small incision on the side of her face, which was made by a box cutter.
Jeez.
From here, I shouldn't say box cutter, it's X-Acto knife, but it's the same.
Same thing.
Yeah. From here, the police woman who was investigating the cases had brought up the photo of Charles Albright, and they had brought in Brenda White and Veronica Rodriguez to show them a picture of him. So they did like the lineup and showed several pictures. Both of them selected him.
That's pretty damning.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty damning, but it's still circumstantial. They're just pointing fingers. They don't have anything to actually tie them to the case. And something that was really interesting in the Forensic Files episode, they talked about there was a particular hair fiber that was found on his jacket, one of the jackets of the victims. And of course, they assumed maybe it's one of his hairs, a pubic hair, or hair from his head, or something on the lines of that. It wasn't. They started testing different animal hairs, and it was actually the squirrel hair. So both of them had, so because he attacked them in the forest, I guess the same squirrel was on both of their jackets.
Wow.
Yep, super random. On March 23rd, Albert was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder. His trial began on December 13th of 1991. The evidence, as I had said, was mostly circumstantial. On December 18th, 1991, so 5 days after the trial had started, the jury deliberated, and he was actually found guilty on only the murder of Shirley Williams. So while doing the research, I came across one of the articles, which I'll source later, that was in the Texas Monthly, and it was written by Skip Hollandsworth. And what he wrote, I was kind of thinking while writing this piece and just while doing my research, but I'm going to quote him. And he says, so in most cases, serial killers are brutal, woefully uneducated young men, lifelong sadists who kill for their own twisted reasons. How then could someone so charming, so exceedingly polite, suddenly decide in the later years of his life to become a bloodthirsty sex monster? Look, I've known Charlie for 30 years, signed one Albert friend, a retired Baptist minister. In all that time, I think I would have seen his dark side slip out at least once. Believe me, if he really was a psychotic killer, he couldn't have kept it a secret all this time, could he? That kind of got me thinking too, when they found Bundy and all of that, and going, to Beck's story too, with BTK, just perfectly seemingly normal men who are apparently educated and all these things, and monsters. I tried to do a little more research on what his fascination with eyes was and all that, and couldn't really find anything. Some were saying that when his mother had helped him do the taxidermy on the animals, because they weren't very wealthy, couldn't buy the glass eyeballs, so they used buttons. So maybe
I'd heard that too before, yeah.
Maybe something came out of that. I'm not sure. There's definitely also been portrayals of this type of case or the same signature in some of the shows that all of us love to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
For those specifically, Criminal Minds, it's in season 5, episode 6. They called their episode The Eyes Have It. So you can find that there. Of course, Forensic Files episode that I'd already mentioned. And then, obviously, everyone knows my obsession with Hannibal and Silence of the Lambs. In Red Dragon, the killer in that also cut out the eyes, but he actually put mirrors in the eyes so that he could see his own reflection while committing the crimes. Now, Charles didn't do that, but I wonder if kind of his crimes played a part in writing this script. So, yeah, it's my guy.
Wow.
But where are the eyes?
They assumed he kept them as trophies, never recovered. Yep.
So someone's going to find them eventually. Or
I mean, I would assume that they're decomposed. He's, if I'm remembering correctly, saying that he's innocent, he didn't do this, all of that. But I don't know. I mean, if you have a true obsession and a fascination, I guess one way to make them part of you is to eat them.
I don't want to know.
I don't know. I just... What a unique signature. So as soon as we talked about doing this case, I was like, well, of course, BTK is the one that comes to mind as a big one. And then this guy, that's just such a easy tie-in. As soon as you found that next murdered victim and you see something that unique, like, okay, it's got to be the same guy because, yeah. So, yeah.
wow.
That's that.
Quite the case.
Wasn't a fun one. You see what I mean?
All right, I'm going to go back in the Wayback Machine again, and I'm going to cover Fritz Haarmann.
What the Fritz?
Yeah, with the Fritz. The pairing...
Who's Fritz Haarmann?
So the pairing here will make a little more sense once we get going here, but this is the Container Brewing Transit New England Double IPA. It's actually a brand new brewery that's opening up soon in Vancouver. This beer comes in at 7.5% alcohol.
This NEPA is about the journey. It's about what comes next and how you get there. Our take on what comes next, more of what you love about a NEPA with an eye to moving this style further into its journey.
It's got a really murky, really cloudy orange color with kind of a slightly off-white head. It's definitely got that nose of a New England IPA. It smells like it's got a lot of hops in it. It's kind of a little bit tropical, a little bit citrus. A little bit of just that plant matter from all the hops. It's kind of sweet tropical. A little bit of like candied pineapple or something. Like just mildly. As Nina plugs her nose to drink it. Not like almost no bitterness. It's a little bit of resin. It's a nice take on the New England IPA. It's not as sweet as a lot of them. Not quite as fruity as a lot. But it's well made.
I prefer the taste if I don't smell it. Well, because I think it has a really strong smell, right?
Yeah.
So I found that, like, for my layman's knowledge of beers, Schnell.
Schnell. That actually will tie into this story a little bit.
Yeah. Anyways, it tastes better than it smells, is where that was going.
All right, let's take a trip across the Atlantic Ocean and head to Germany.
Haha. Schnell.
Our villain was born on October 25th, 1879 in Hanover in the German Empire. His name was Friedrich Heinrich Karl Haarmann, but he would be known as Fritz, which I'm happy about because that's a long-ass name.
Yep. And you almost said it perfectly.
Almost? Perfect. You heard about this one before?
No, but German, lived there.
Yeah, true.
I met a lot of Fritzes. I don't know if that's true or not.
He was born to Joanna and Ollie Haarmann and was the youngest of 6 children. Joanna was 41 when the two married, and Ollie was 7 years younger. He married her due to the fact that she was wealthy, and the marriage would mean a large dowry. What a reason to marry, right?
Yep.
Ollie, his father, was also a man that loved an argument, and he had a short temper. Really a bad combination, if you ask me. He ruled the house with an iron fist and had little time for his children. He had to make time for his real passion. That was being a womanizer, and he had several affairs during the marriage. Fritz was an odd child in his day. He kept to himself for the most part and did not have many friends of his age or gender. He would spend even less time with children outside of his school. Basically, he was a loner. He began his schooling in 1886, and his teacher said that he was a big daydreamer and also a spoiled child. He hated things like sports and preferred to play with his older sister's dolls, or even dressing up in their clothing. He would take on needlework and develop a love for cooking. Like many youngest children, he was spoiled by his mother, and he would become very close to her.
Mama's boy.
Hell yeah. He was well behaved in school, but he was no academic. He even had to repeat grades twice. at the age of 8, he would have some serious trauma that he would never fully discuss, as one of his teachers molested him.
Oof.
Yeah. In 1894, Fritz would leave school as a trim and physically strong youth. My sources said that he left school with his parents' consent, so that makes me believe he did not finish his schooling. It didn't really say he dropped out, but kind of sounded like it. Right after leaving school, he got a job as an apprentice locksmith in a town I cannot pronounce.
Let me try.
I didn't write it down because I can't pronounce it.
Quitter.
It's so much easier that way. His parents would soon urge him to take his life in a different direction, and that direction was to join the military academy in
Brycia.
Thank you. He would begin his training on April 4th, 1895. He took to the military life quite well and was said to perform well as a soldier in training. Unfortunately, life in the military would not be for him, as only 5 months into his training he would have, as they said, have periodic lapses of consciousness as well as seizures. Military doctors would at first diagnose him with sudden onset anxiety neurosis, and then later as being equivalent to epilepsy. After less than 1 year in the academy, he would be discharged due to his medical conditions. He would head back to his hometown of Hanover and would for a short time be employed by his father's cigar factory. Now, back for the military academy at 16 is when the first signs of deviance started to pop up. He began to lure young boys into secluded areas like cellars and sexually abuse them. In July 1896, he would finally be arrested for committing offenses against young boys. Now, of course, instead of putting him in jail, they opted to put him in a mental institution in
Hildesheim
in February 1897. He was temporarily transferred over to Hanover Hospital to have a psychiatric evaluation done. The diagnosis was that he was certifiably incurably deranged. They would decide that he was unfit to stand trial and he would be indefinitely remanded to a mental institution.
That's incredibly vague.
Yeah.
Well, they just probably didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah.
So you get the blanket.
It's your medical diagnosis. You're
cuckoo. Fucked.
For everything, not just Cocoa Puffs.
You're cuckoo bananas, yeah. So he was sent back to the mental institution on May 28th, 1897. Fritz was obviously not happy being in the institution and would escape 7 months later. His mother, Joanna, helped him flee to Zurich, Switzerland, where he moved in with a relation of his mother's. He would get a job as a handyman at a shipyard. This lasted for 16 months until he tired of Switzerland, and he moved back to Hanover in 1899. Like, why not move back to where you're actually wanted, right?
Idiot. Well, he's crazy. So.
Yeah, he is, yeah. Early in 1900, he would meet a woman named Erna Lewert and become engaged. Soon after that, she would become pregnant. So remember when he went back to the military academy? Well, his time in the military was not over, as it turns out that in October 1900, he was notified he would have to do his compulsory military service.
But isn't he supposed to be in the loony bin? So it's like, okay, he escaped, and now you're going to summon him back to, like, makes no sense.
Yep.
And why would they want someone who's a criminal back in the army? I mean, I know why, it's a rhetorical question, but, like, come on.
A lot of these companies have compulsory service. You don't have a choice. You have to go regardless. But yeah.
Stupid.
And some countries still have that. Like Italy still has.
Cuba,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Although Cuba never goes to war, but
but still.
You jinxed it.
Very quickly, he was deployed to
Alsatin? I don't know.
Alsatin city of Colmar to serve in the number 10 Rifle Battalion. So I had to look up where the heck this was, as I had never heard of Colmar. So Colmar was part of the German Empire back in 1871.
Thanks, Google.
And in 1918, it moved over to a part of France.
The country just moved.
Oh, it's a portion of the country that... The borders slid a lot back in the day. I shake my fist at you. Mm-hmm. Again, he had a reputation of being a great soldier and even an excellent marksman. He would consider this the best part of his life, but sadly for him, he would collapse while out on exercise with his battalion in October 1901. This began his next bout of health issues with persistent dizzy spells. He would finally be deemed unfit for service and work and be dismissed from the military at the end of July 1902. The part of his life he liked, gone. His diagnosis was dementia precox. The definition of this is as follows. It's a disused psychiatric diagnosis that originally designated a chronic, deteriorating psychotic disorder characterized by rapid cognitive disintegration, usually beginning in the late teens and early adulthood.
Obviously.
Yeah. This diagnosis did get him a monthly military pension of 21 gold marks, though.
The equivalent of... I don't
No
know.
idea.
I don't.
I can look up dollars, but not that.
Yeah.
He would head back to Hanover and live with his fiancée and work only briefly.
Must be nice.
He would try to sue his father for maintenance support, as he was not able to work due to his ailments that the military discharged him over. The judge did not go for it, though, and the case was dropped. The next year, Fritz and his father would get into a violent altercation, and this time his father would try and have his son committed back to the mental institution. He would end up being ordered to have a psychiatric examination once again in May 1903. This guy's just got a great thing going for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
This time he was deemed morally inferior, but not mentally unstable. Which is pretty on point for what's going to come.
Okay. Imagine being, like, labeled inferior.
Yeah.
I think that would give me a complex, too, like...
Fritz and his fiancée would go on to open a fishmongery with financial backing of his father. So why the fuck would he end up backing them?
What's a mongery?
They sell fish.
They sell fish, yeah.
Fishmonger is a person that sells fish.
Okay.
He would also attempt to sell insurance for a time, but would end up being classified as disabled and able to work by the Army in 1904.
Because that's similar to selling fish.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And insurance. Would you like to add some life insurance to your cod today?
We have a special on right now. Free tuna.
Tuna insurance.
Mm-hmm.
But boat insurance would make sense.
Yes,
You can go
yes, it
cash
would.
your own fishes.
That same year, again pregnant, his fiancée left him.
Oh.
The fishmongery was in her name, so she kicked him out. This is where he once again became a criminal. For the next 10 years, he lived as a petty theft, burglar, and con artist. When he did get some honest work, he would steal from the place of businesses and their customers. So just who you want.
Come on, Prawns. Fritz, whatever your name is.
Between 1905 and 1912, he would spend quite a bit of time in and out of prison. Then in 1913, he was arrested for burglary, as a search of his home would find a large amount of stolen property from many burglaries. He would be sentenced to 5 years in prison this time.
What did people have at that time to even steal? Like TVs and DVDs? Like,
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
I'm kidding. But
Getting their
like,
DVRs. And
that's
Tools,
my sheep.
Food,
Like,
clothes. Yeah.
yes.
Livestock.
Sheep. Livestock? Okay.
Yeah. Now, with World War I breaking out in 1914, men were scarce as there was compulsory conscription. This meant that in the last year of his sentence, he would spend his days working in town and then returning to prison at nights. Once he was released in April 1918, he moved temporarily to Berlin before moving back to Hanover, where he would live with a sister in a single-room apartment. Germany then lost the war in November 1918, and a horrible poverty struck Germany. This would drop him right back into the life of crime. With extreme poverty and poorly paid police, crime was rampant. Fritz would become an informant for the police and keep himself out of prison.
So he was a snitch.
Yes. So this part I'll take right from Wikipedia. Despite police knowledge that Haarmann was both a known criminal and a known homosexual, then illegal and punishable by imprisonment in Germany, Fritz gradually began to establish a relationship with Hanover police as an informer, largely as a means of redirecting the attention of the police from him in his own criminal activities and to facilitate his access to young males. That's the end of the quote. That's pretty sick, huh? Thing moves from petty crime, though, from between 1918 and 1924. This is where he gained his multiple monikers. He was known as the Butcher of Hanover, the Vampire of Hanover, and the Wolfman.
I know those ones, but I didn't realize this was all of his background.
Yeah.
Ew, it's going to get weird.
He is known to have murdered at least 24, but is suspected of killing a minimum of 27 people. All of Fritz's victims were male between the ages of 10 and 22 years old, but most of his victims fell between the mid to late teens. He would lure the young boys or men to one of 3 places that he lived over the years. So he would use all kinds of different ways to lure the kids with all kinds of excuses such as assistance, accommodation, work, or would pretend that they were under arrest, pretend he was a cop.
Kind of sounds like what Gacy did when he promised all those guys, all the men, work with his construction firm and all that, and then just magically disappear.
So his signature was quite horrific, and it would fit into almost any horror movie of today. He would usually distract the boy with food or drink, and then strike where he would bite into their Adam's apple. This would sometimes kill the boys via asphyxiation, but on several occasions, the bite would be so strong it would go right through their Adam's apple and their trachea. He dubbed this his love bite.
You'd have to be pretty distracted to not...
Well, I mean,
Stop that. I'm a little confused about this.
These are like, quote-unquote love interests. I mean, it's gross because it's mostly pedophilia. But, it's with a lot of men that be in the guise of a sexual encounter in the end.
You think you're getting a hickey, and then the next thing you know, you're dead.
You get them a little...
Yeah, I guess I was confused
and
because the distraction was food. And it's like...
Food and drink, just kind of get them distracted, and they're not thinking about stuff, and then quickly strike, right?
I guess.
Maybe he's feeding them grapes as they're laying down, and then as their neck is up, he's like, ah!
Could be.
I wonder what his teeth look like if they were sharp.
Don't know.
Because,
Like if he filed them or something.
Well, skin is pretty tough, right? To actually go through Adam's apple and that?
Yeah.
Even if skin's not. That's cartilage as well.
Yeah. It definitely would take a lot of work. It would not be easy to do this.
Yeah, it definitely would be a single chomp.
Gross.
Yeah, definitely. After the murder, he would dismember the boys' remains and dispose of them. Many bodies were tossed into the Line River. The first victim's dismembered body had been buried, and the last known victim had been tossed into a lake at the entrance of the Herrenhausen Gardens. Fritz was not done here, though, as he would keep all of the personal possessions of his victims.
Discreet.
Mm-hmm. Well,
He was a thief. What is he going to do? Throw stuff away?
If he was smart.
Well, he isn't.
Yeah. Well, that is, some would be kept for himself. Some would go to his lover, Hans Grans, and the rest would be sold on the black market.
Hans Grans?
Yes.
Hans. Hansel.
Why don't your parents like you?
And you can make fun of him because he's also a criminal.
Okay. Hans.
Another note is that it is well known that Fritz dealt in contraband meat during these times, and it is rumored that he may have been selling the flesh of his victims on the black market as pork or horse meat. Now, there's no proof of this,
but we all know
but it's definitely a rumor that was going around at the time.
It's a strong possibility.
So let's talk about Fritz Haarmann's first victim. His first known victim was Friedel Roth, a 17-year-old that had run away from home. He disappeared on September 27th, 1918, and his friend told police he was last seen with Fritz. Roth's family would finally pressure the police to go to Fritz's apartment in October. When they arrived, they found Fritz with a half-naked 13-year-old boy.
Yeah.
In the end...
Wasn't me.
It wasn't you.
Shaggy. Got red-handed. Wasn't me.
It wasn't me. In the end, he was charged with sexual assault and battery of a minor and would spend 9 months in jail. Much later, he would tell police that if they had properly searched his home, they would have found Friedel's head wrapped in paper behind his stove.
Idiots.
In 1919, he would find his lover Hans Grans, an 18-year-old who had run away from his home in Berlin after a fight with his father. He had been sleeping in a train station at the time in Hanover and was trying to sell old clothing to make money just so he could eat. And that's why I went with transit for the beer. And it'll get more tied in here.
Okay.
He would then meet Fritz at the station. Hans Grans was heterosexual, but approached Fritz with the idea of selling his body as he had heard Fritz was gay. It's sick that Fritz was quoted as saying he thought Hans, quote, was like a son to him, adding that he pulled him, Grounds, out of the ditch and tried to make sure he didn't go to the dogs. Remember, this is his lover.
Mm-hmm.
Only a short time after this meeting, Fritz would ask him to move in with him, and this started their sexual and criminal relationship. Over the years, their relationship was rocky, and they moved around to multiple homes, with Hans being kicked out on occasion. Hans Grounds would also have a female lover over the years, one of which met Fritz's victims. His next murder was one of those times, and this took place on February 12th, 1923. This time it was Frank, who was targeted at Hanover Central Station. He came back to the home where Fritz and Hans lived, and when they arrived, he was introduced to the two ladies Hans had at the house. Hans Grounds was quoted as saying to one of the ladies, "Hey, he's going to get trampled on today."
What?
Hans Grounds would go out, but come back to the apartment to find Frank's body nude and lying on the bed. Hans is quoted as saying, "When shall I come back again?" While he stared at Fritz. It would only be 5 weeks later when he would strike again, on March 20th. He would find Wilhelm Schultz at Hanover Station. This was his hunting ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wilhelm was traveling on the train to work when he had the misfortune of meeting Fritz. His body was never found, but almost all of his clothes were in the possession of Fritz's landlady when Fritz was finally arrested. Before Fritz left his current address, 2 more boys were murdered. First, a 16-year-old Ronald Huck. He disappeared on May 23rd. He had told his best friend that he intended to run away from his home and join the Marines. The next was 19-year-old Hans Sonnenfeld. He disappeared on May 31st. Fritz is known to have worn this young man's distinctive yellow jacket for a time after his death.
Is running away and joining the military like a thing?
But I think if it guarantees a future or a job or something, right? Like you have housing, shelter, food.
Yeah.
You're away from whatever you're running away from, right?
You got to remember, too, this is Germany between World War I and World War II. It's a severely poor country.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much going for it. So military would be one place they could go and be guaranteed food and work. And
what I just said, yeah.
Yeah. On June 9th, 1923, Fritz would go on to move to a new residence, a single-room attic apartment. He did not slow down, though, as 2 weeks after the move, he was at it again, as he picked up a 13-year-old Ernst Ehringer. This was the young child of a neighbor who had been out running an errand for his father. His braces and his school hat would be found at Fritz's home after the arrest.
So young.
Yeah. After a 2-month layoff, Fritz was back at it with an 18-year-old office clerk, Heinrich Strauss. His possessions, including a violin case, would eventually be found at Fritz's home. After 1 month, the next victim was picked up. This time it was 17-year-old Paul Brunishevsky, who disappeared en route to visit his uncle. His jacket, knapsack, trousers, and a towel would all be found in Fritz's possession.
It's crazy some of the things he kept, like what? The violin, obviously, for value, but the other kids' braces? Like, what the fuck are you going to do with those?
Memento.
Yeah, it's just mementos, yeah. His next known victim was killed only days later on September 30th, 1923, it is believed. This was a 17-year-old Richard Graf, a boy that told his family a man at Hanover Station had a good job for him. Only 2 weeks later, a 16-year-old boy, Wilhelm Erdner, didn't return home from work. The family would tell the cops that he got to know a detective Fritz just before his disappearance. So the detective Fritz Honnerbrook, I bet you guessed this is one of Fritz's pseudonyms. On October 20th, Fritz and Hans would sell the poor boy's bike. Only a week later, Fritz would take 2 more lives. First was Herman Wolf, 15, who went missing from Hanover Station. The next poor kid was 13-year-old Heinz Brinkman. A witness put Heinz at the station at 11 p.m. as he had missed his train home. I have no idea how there was no suspicion at this point, as almost all of the victims had come from Hanover Station. Again, on November 10th, 1923, he would find 17-year-old Adolf Hannapel, an apprentice carpenter at the station. He was seen sitting on his trunk in the waiting room. There were positive IDs of Hans Grounds pointing this boy out to Fritz.
So he, like, found him victims.
Yeah. Shortly after they spotted him, they all walked over to the cafe. He took almost a month break before finding his next poor victim. This time it was 19-year-old Adolf Heinz, who had just been looking for work. Once caught, Fritz would admit to dismembering but not killing him. Fritz's signature love bite was not found on this child, according to Hans and one of the criminal counterparts. So he could have actually been killed by Hans and someone else.
Yeah.
So the calendar may have turned over, but Fritz did not turn over a new leaf on January 5th, 1924, because he was back at it. This time it was 17-year-old Ernst Speicher. Now they only know this to be Fritz's work, as Hans Granz had all of his possessions after Fritz's arrest. 10 days later, 20-year-old Heinrich Kosch would be the next victim. There appears to be proof that Fritz and Heinrich knew each other before the murder. So they move ahead again to February. He was back at it as he killed a 19-year-old Willy Sanger and also 16-year-old Hermann Speicher. Both guys were last seen at their respective sisters. Willy Sanger's clothes would be found at Fritz's apartment after his arrest. He is then believed to have killed Hermann Bach because he was in possession of his clothing, but he was acquitted of this charge at trial. He also gave Hermann's suitcase to his landlady. Fritz was also said to have told Bach's friend not to report him missing. Because, we're going to listen to some random guy.
Mm-hmm.
Don't report him missing. He's not missing. Mm-hmm. He's just never coming home.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fine.
He went away. Then on April 8th, 16-year-old Alfred Hogref went missing from Hanover Station. Only 9 days later, this monster would pick up a 16-year-old Wilhelm Appel, who would be on his way to work. April was a busy month for Fritz as he picked up his fourth victim on April 26th. This time, it was Robert Witzel. He had borrowed money from his mother to head to the circus.
Just thinking of, like, circus music.
May brought more horror as Heinz Martin, a 14-year-old boy, would go missing on May 9th, 1924. Again, he was thought to be abducted from Hanover Station, as his clothing was later found at Fritz's home. Still in May, on the 26th, Fritz Wittig would go missing, a 17-year-old traveling salesman. It was said at trial that Hans Granz had asked Fritz to kill him as he was wearing a good new suit that Hans wanted.
Yeah, that's enough reason.
On the exact same day, they think that he killed his youngest victim, a 10-year-old boy named Friedrich Abling. He had skipped out of school when he went missing. So June would be the last month that he would be on the prowl. But he would not go empty-handed, sadly. The first victim was Heinrich Kosch, a 16-year-old boy. He was on the way to school when Fritz approached him. His last known victim was 17-year-old Eric de Vries on June 14th, 1924. He again found this child at Hanover Station, and his remains would be found in a lake dismembered. He would go on to tell that he had to take 4 trips to fully dispose of the body in the lake.
Poor guy. 4 whole trips.
Mm-hmm. And they still found him.
Yeah. Rumors started to fly about large numbers of young boys and men going missing from in and around Hanover Station. The body parts started to show up in mid-May, with a skull being found by 2 children playing near the Line River. There was talk that this might have been a skull from a suicide or from grave robbers at first. They also wondered if it could have been from remnants of a typhoid outbreak. But then on May 29th, a second skull was found behind a mill, and this happened to be close to the first skull discovery. Much to everyone's horror, soon after, 2 boys playing in a field would come upon a sack of human remains.
Jeez.
June would have 2 more skulls found, one on the Line River and one close to the mill in West Hanover. These 2 skulls showed what seemed to be evidence of being scalped.
Oh my God.
Once these bodies started to show up, various newspapers in the area would start talking about the sheer number of missing young men from the area that would number close to 600.
Whoa.
So it's no wonder people didn't know where the hell these young boys were, because everyone was going missing. So now, of course, these were not all of Fritz's victims, but it would also make it hard to figure out what was going on at this time.
Mm-hmm.
June 8th would have hundreds of Hanover residents searching the Lion River for bodies. When they found a number of bones, the police decided they needed to dredge the entire section of the river. This dredging would uncover 500 human bones and sections of bodies. Many would show hints of knife marks. These would be confirmed to be made up of at least 22 different humans. Fritz Haarmann would be a suspect fairly quickly due to the fact that police knew of his criminal past and also distrusted him due to him being a gay man. This was on top of the fact that he was connected to the 1918 disappearance of the 14-year-old Friedel Roth. Because he was well known to police, they knew to send the surveillance to Hanover Station starting on June 18, 1924. On June 22nd, 2 undercover agents would spot him prowling the station and would be seen arguing with a young 15-year-old boy named Karl Fromm. The police would arrest the child on false pretense to be able to question him. He would tell them that he had been living with Fritz for 4 days, and during the time he had been raped multiple times, and some of the times he would have a knife held to his neck. Fritz was arrested the next day and charged with sexual assault.
Took long enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a long, long time. After his arrest, his home was searched, and his walls, floors, and bedding were all noted to be extensively blood-stained.
Ugh.
His excuse for the blood was that he was trading in contraband meat.
And slicing it up in his bed.
Yeah. His neighbors and acquaintances would all be questioned, and they would all divulge that he had a long line of young boys over to his home over the years. They even would say that he had been seen leaving his home with concealed sacks and bags, usually really late at night or early in the morning.
No one said anything earlier.
No. The early 1900s. They would also find clothing and possessions that were thought to be from the missing boys. His goose was cooked on June 29th, though, when clothing, boots, and keys were all connected to 18-year-old Robert Witzel. Robert's jacket was then found in the possession of Fritz's landlady. It was now that he would finally confess to the rape, murder, and dismemberment of these boys and young men between 1918 and 1924. He would describe it as rabid sexual passion. He claimed he never intended to kill the boys, but would be seized by an irresistible urge to bite into their throat and their Adam's apple.
Then how about just stay away from them?
Agreed.
Well, a sane mind would think to stay away from something like that, or they would get help. But mind you, I can't say sane because obviously he's not sane. So
he said he would do this in throes of ecstasy before he would collapse onto the bodies. The investigation into Fritz would be a very thorough one. They would ask Fritz how many victims he had, and he would claim between 50 and 70. Police could only ever connect him to 27 victims, though, as this is what he was charged with. He tried to accuse Hans Granz of insisting he killed some of the boys, though. On July 8th of that year, Hans Granz would be arrested as an accessory to murder. After a psychological review, Fritz would be deemed fit to stand trial. So, before he was known to be this crazy criminal, he's not sane. But suddenly he is sane now.
But it could also be part of a public outcry where they just need someone to blame for all of this. And
probably.
Now he fits the bill. Obviously he was guilty, but I don't know.
So the trial began on December 4th, 1924, and of course Fritz would insist to defend himself. Because they all do.
Well, I don't know how many public defenders they had at that time, but...
Yeah, but he insisted to defend himself. It was...
Yeah.
A lot of these people that are this psychopathic, they think they're smart enough.
For sure.
He admitted guilt of all 27 murders, but could not identify the last 13 victims that were listed in the charges. The trial would last barely 2 weeks and would have 190 witnesses called to the stand. On December 19th, 1924, Fritz was found guilty of 27 of 27 murders, sentenced to death by beheading. When the sentence was read, Fritz is quoted as saying, "I accept the verdict fully and freely," before adding, "I shall go to the decapitating block joyfully and happily." Hans Granz would also get the death penalty verdict in the death of Adolf Hanelpel, with a 12-year imprisonment added on as an accessory to murder of Fritz Wittag. Like, why bother with an extra 12 years when you're dead?
But also, if this guy got off on biting people in the neck and, like, chopping their heads off, why would you chop his head off? Like, people, I don't know. Wouldn't that also for him be just, like, a turn-on, that his own head?
Yeah,
Or would it be his worst nightmare?
Yeah, that's true.
Because he liked the power of doing it to someone else.
Yeah, but just the excitement of it's about to happen. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to
Yeah.
get into his mind,
Yeah.
but I feel like that's kind of bittersweet that you get taken out by your preferred weapon of choice.
Yeah.
or
Well, at least
method.
they don't
It
give
was
him...
their option at the time.
I
Yeah, it
suppose.
was, yeah.
But a shooting rifle squad, they had guns.
Yeah, they did, but I don't know.
I don't know.
So on April 15th, 1925, at 6 a.m., Fritz Haarmann was beheaded by guillotine at Hanover prison. As was tradition in Germany, Fritz was not given any notice of his execution date until the day he was executed.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it is. You can't be, like, psyched up about it or anything. His last wish was to have an expensive cigar and Brazilian coffee in his cell.
I don't understand granting the last wish.
My
Or
last
the
wish is
last
to be
meal,
freed.
or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You hear about some of the meals and stuff that people had as their last meal, and it's like, there's legitimate, hard-working, poor people that never get to eat as well as this bag of shit did.
Sounds like
On
most
their
places
last
don't
day.
allow those crazy last meals anymore.
Yeah, they don't. But they never should have.
I agree.
But I think it was maybe a way to try to make themselves feel better.
Yeah.
They don't deserve to feel better.
I mean, the executioners feel better.
The execution was a private affair with only a few witnesses. The last words Haarmann spoke were, "I am guilty, gentlemen, but hard though it may be, I want to die as a man." Immediately prior to placing his head upon the execution apparatus, Haarmann added, "I repent, but I do not fear death."
And then kaplow. Heads
There-
will roll.
There is now a bronze memorial that depicts the crimes of Fritz Haarmann at Hanover Sprengel Museum. So let's finish up with Hans Granz. They would find a letter from Fritz that stated that Hans was innocent, and this would lead to a second trial. The letter was dated February 5th, 1925. So this is Wikipedia. In this letter, Haarmann claimed that although he had been frustrated at having been seen as little more than a meal ticket by Hans Granz, he had absolutely no idea that I killed. Furthermore, Hans claimed many of his accusations against Granz prior to the trial were obtained under extreme duress, and that he falsely accused Granz of instigating the murders of Haarmann and Witzel as a means of revenge. Haarmann claimed that his pastor would be informed as to the contents of the authenticity of the letter. So it's the end of the letter.
I find that hard to believe, though. I feel like he must have had something to do with it. Like,
Yeah.
one or two victims, okay, maybe you somewhat hid that, but having all those artifacts in the house and them living together, like,
Yeah.
what do you... Oh, where'd you get those braces? Oh, I found them on the street? Like, what the fuck?
Especially if there was that much blood, too, because you'd be able to smell that.
Oh, yeah, you're right. The bed. Ugh.
Yeah. Hans Granz was put back on trial in January 1926. It was expected that he would be acquitted on all charges, but in the end, the judge found him guilty. But this time, he was only sentenced to 2 concurrent 12-year terms. After the 12 years, he was not set free, though. World War II was only a year away, and the Germans had already started up their concentration camps. He was sent to a concentration camp and would live there through all of World War II. Mm-hmm. After the war, he would live in Hanover until his death in 1975. The very last note I would like to leave you with is this. After Fritz Haarmann's arrest and execution, things got worse in Germany for gay people, as the horrors that Fritz had done to these young men fed into the prejudice at the time. It was already illegal at this time, but one historian is noted as saying, quote, "It split the gay rights movement irreparably and fed every prejudice against homosexuality and provided a new fodder for conservative adversaries of legal sex reform." So, that's my story.
Yikes.
Yeah. Horrible fucking man that caused even more problems for a community between World War I and World War II.
That's just interesting, too, because, I mean, these children, they're victims, right? They're not...
Yeah.
Who cares what gender, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like it is a victim. How do you blame them for anything?
Oh, you don't. Yeah, you know. You blame Fritz all the way.
Well, and Heinz, the ketchup.
Hans, yeah.
Heinz, whatever.
No.
Same,
Hans
same, but different.
Well, that's our episode, I guess. So thanks for tuning in. You can find us on social media at Brew Crime. You can email us at brewcrime@pacificbeerchat.com if you'd like. If you'd like to support Brew Crime, you can go to patreon.com/brewcrime. You'll get early access to our episodes, and they'll be ad-free. And we can use that money to upgrade our equipment and make the show better. So big shout out to our Patreon supporters. We got the 3 Beers In podcast, Amber, Ange, Daniela, Nina's mom, the Faves of Our Life podcast, and our newest Patreon supporter, True Crime Nana. So if you'd like to help us, go to patreon.com/brewcrime. So thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye. Here's a promo from one of the podcasts in the Big Heads Media Network.
Small Town Secrets is a podcast that explores the secrets and strangeness of small towns across the globe. They may be local legends, paranormal, true crime, or just plain weird. Join me every other week as I tell you stories of these small towns, as well as local headlines and listener stories. Get it wherever you get your podcast. For more info, check out stscast.com. Every town has a secret. What is yours?
Now here is a promo from a fellow true crime or spooky podcast that we really enjoy. Hope you'll take a listen.
Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. I'm CJ, host of a new podcast called Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBT community. In this podcast, we cover cases not so well known, as well as more notorious ones. A lot of interesting info mixed with a little bit of snark, but always focusing on the empathy I feel for the victims. Please give us a listen on your favorite podcast app. Push subscribe. And remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.
No.
For the
Yeah,
can
that's
cracking. I don't want to break my nails opening it, so.
I'm gonna... One sec.
Okay.
I gotta edit that.
So much butter on my fingers, and it's in my eyes now.
Go wash your hands.
Nope.
Saving butter for later.
Yeah, for the lasagna.
Okay.
That's literally one of the most disgusting things I've ever tasted.
Yeah, I can't drink
It
that.
really is, but whatever. Ugh, Coors. What the
Okay.
fuck?
So,
Yeah.
bow.
Sorry, it was my nails.
You were gonna say something, though?
No, because I don't want to give away the ending.
Okay. Radio silence.
It went dormant for many, many years.
Which you're supposed to have a sound clip ready for.
Oh shit, was I?
Yeah. I sent it to you a week ago.
I'll be right
It's not
back.
like super pressing.
No, I'll be right back.
Sorry. She really likes to blow her nose on people.
Yeah, she does.
Maya, out from under the table.
You just have
The hell?
I can't even say.
Wow.
Should I send that to my mom?
Wow.
Sorry.
That's good, but awful. Okay, this might be loud for a second while I just...
Sure. I have a paragraph that has like 3 typos in it. I'm just leaving a note for myself.
Okay.
I don't want to break a nail. In 1981, he was visiting with some friends, and he actually sexually molested Start that again. No, I didn't say that right. Go back.
Squirrel Holmes.
The hairs matched.
Have you seen that?
That was her ears.
Really?
Yeah, her ears.
I'm like, who did that?
It was her ears.
Have you seen that cat meme? You press the bean, you get the mean.
What?
I just took a big
Her
gulp and
damn
I got
face.
goosebumps my whole body. Did not like that last sip.
A lot like this.
Oh, okay. See if it's got anything written on it, really. Oh, jeez.
Oh, do you need glasses? Do you need a young person eyes?
It's just dark and it's hard to read.
Maya, I see you eyeing up the chips.
She won't take any.
Don't touch.
Maya. It's wet can.
Ew!
Because the can was wet.
The beer can.
Down.
Yeah, it's which can, right? Oh, my. Wow. All right.
Be here all day, guys. At least for another 25 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's Nina drinking.
Yeah, of course, that's Nina drinking, yes.
Sorry, that would be Maya.
We still have the puppy here.
Good girl.
Wow, this is... Okay. We're so cute.
Yeah, totally.
Burp, 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 burp.
The wave.
Yeah. Burp, 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 burp. Let's just not start the far away.
What's your guys' signature burp on everything?
Uh-huh. Thanks a lot, IPA.
Yeah. Just beer in general.
Mirror, 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 mirror.
He was born to Joanna...
Joanna, do you want to finish that sentence?
Marijuana? No. The diagnosis was...
Not good.
Despite...
He would lure all kinds of lures.
Yes. In 1919, he would find his lover Hans Grans and eat...
Can't get over that name. Hans Grans. Sounds like a expensive ketchup.
In 1919...
In 1990.
In 1919...
Okay.
Okay.
3rd time's the charm.
Yes. In 1919, he would find his lover Hans Grans.
I'm sorry.
I finally said it right.
Oh.
She farted.
What the hell, Maya?
It's a treat I gave her, I'm telling you. And the popcorn.
Yeah.